Greetings, ladies and gents, earthlings and extraterrestrials alike. We'd like to welcome you to another edition of 2 P's in a Pod, where knowledge is the seed, and we ask you to always dot your I's and cross your T's and heed the words of the famous group Public Enemy and
don't believe the hype.
He's the professionally polished, polite professor and Prince Lemons, and I'm Burrell, the part-time philosopher and part-time poet from Pluto, where peace prevails. Our channel is dedicated to bringing you historical, cultural, and socially relevant topics with information on a global perspective. Our goal is to hit you with a threefold message. 1, education, for knowledge is power. 2, exposure. We hope that by exposing you to new, revealing, concealed, or interesting material, that it will help benefit you in the present as well as in choosing your own future, not the one that someone has chosen for you. And 3, empowerment. We hope that we empower you to gain control of your life as well as your rights with confidence and help others do the same. So how do you do, sir?
I'm good, man. I'm good.
Greetings, and it feels good to be back here back again.
Got another video
In the Melanation studios.
Yes.
Shout out to the Melanation. All right, we have some great information for you today on the presence of melanated people around the world. So let's get started with our quote of the day.
If we as a people realize the greatness from which we came, we will be less likely to disrespect ourselves. Marcus Garvey.
Right. So before we begin our topic for today, we want to talk about the presence of melanated people and what we mean by melanated people around the world, or the so-called Negro or Black people of America. First, we have to be clear in distinguishing ourselves from those disregarding labels that other people have put on us throughout the years. Throughout our show and throughout this channel, you're going to hear us refer to ourselves as melanated people, because we are of the belief that the pigmentation in our skin is rooted in that chemical called melanin, which contains so much more power than we know. If you want to do some research on it, just go study the pineal gland and hit us up. According to the great ancient Egyptians, we are all indeed sons and daughters of the sun. We have 4 interesting topics for you today. The first topic will be on the melanated influence around the world today. The second, the influence of the Moors in America. The third, Moors' influence around the world. And the fourth, the ancient melanated civilizations that influenced the world as we know it. So let's get started. The first topic will be on influence around the world. So you've been to many countries, from South Africa to Southeast Asia, in the UAE. You've lived there in the UAE, and you've been to other parts of Europe. What is the melanated influence around the world as you see it, based on your travels and based on your research?
The influence of this melanin around the world spans the globe. We've seen all of the elements of hip-hop around the world, whether it's the graffiti, whether it's the dance, from the popping and locking, the rap, and then the DJing. We see all types of DJs creating music and also the dress. And in my research, I've seen and found a lot of pictures from around the world where everyone just wants to have a little piece of anyone that's in this skin from America. And you can see the influence in the graffiti around the world. Like I said, in my research, I found pictures of Tupac and Biggie, and so I'll show a couple of pictures. You'll see a couple of these pictures here. This first picture is a picture of Biggie in Seoul, Korea. So all the way in Seoul, Korea. In South Korea, you'll see the influence of hip-hop there. This next picture is a picture of Biggie down in Spain. So you see the graffiti here, and you see the music with Biggie in this picture. This next picture is a picture that was just some graffiti that was made in Madrid, Spain. And Tupac is right here. The influence is there, all the way on the other side of the world. And this one is in Melbourne, Australia. Yeah, so the influence is there. And this last picture right here is a picture from Sierra Leone. The graffiti that's written on the wall is of Tupac.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So when we talk about the influence around the world today, you said you can see it evident in the dance, you can see it in the music, you can see it in the art. So those elements of hip hop are present.
Yeah.
You know, we talk a lot about the hip hop in America, but hip hop spans the globe.
Spans the globe.
So the melanated presence can be seen not just through hip hop, but through dance, through music, through art.
Yeah. They've even established companies. This company is called Third Street Beat, and it teaches young kids how to dance. They have a website, and they just keep teaching. They're teaching them all of the aspects of hip hop and
Wow.
dance and things like that. The influence is there.
And when we talk about hip hop, we're talking about graffiti, we're talking about breakdancing, we're talking about beatboxing, we're talking about MCing and DJing.
Yeah.
We know that like groups like the Jabberwockies and
Yeah.
people like that
Exactly.
are heavily influenced
Yeah.
by, and you see a lot of that going on in the arts.
Yeah.
The next topic that we have is on the Moors in America. I want to know, why do you think that it's so relevant and so important that we talk about the Moors as we talk about the presence of melanated people around the world?
Because the word Moor actually means dark skin. I know we've all had or have seen the Encyclopedia Britannica. So what they've done is they've created a website, and if you look up the word Moor, it just means people that are from Morocco or people that might have been in Spain or Portugal and might be of Arab descent. It also says that the term is of little use in describing the ethnic characteristics of any group, ancient or modern. But then it also says, from the Middle Age to the 17th century, however, Europeans depicted Moors as being black, swarthy, or tawny in skin color.
Very interesting.
Yeah. So they're letting you know that
yes.
this skin right here. When you hear Moor, they're talking about this skin right here.
So it's not that it was always that when we see Moor, we often think Muslim in origin.
No.
It doesn't always necessarily mean that. They were Muslim.
Many of them were Muslim.
Many. But when they said Moor, they meant black,
The
dark skin.
Yes.
Okay.
Swarthy, which
All
means
right.
the darkest skin.
So, sir, you have some more information about the Moors in America and the Moor presence in America. I think you have a video for us that
I do.
you would like to show.
When I do my research, I like for my research to be scientifically based. And what I've found is a video that lets us know that as melanated people or Moors in America, we were the first group of people in all of the Americas, whether you're talking about North America, Central America, or South America. So just check this video out and let us know what you think.
French archaeologists have just finished digging in Pedra Furada, the largest of the rock shelters. Their aim was to go back in time to a period well before the arrival of American Indians. Every foot they dug took them thousands of years back into prehistory. When they reached layers 40,000 years old, they found these. Pieces of quartzite that look remarkably like stone tools. The edges on one side of the stones were flaked off, Were these stones shaped into cutting tools by human hands? If so, then the history of the discovery of the Americas would have to be rewritten. But if people had been here before the American Indians, surely there would be other traces of their presence. The archaeologists continued to dig, down to depths 50,000 years old. And then they found this. Fragments of animal bone and charcoal. For Anne-Marie Passy, one of the archaeologists involved in the dig, these fragments were proof of human occupation.
On trouvait des structures de feu.
We found structures shaped like hearths.
Alors, à côté du charbon,
Next to
parfois,
the
ça
charcoal,
dépend les périodes,
depending on the
on retrouvait
period,
des
we
restes
sometimes found food leftovers of animals they may have eaten.
d'animaux qui ont pu être consommés.
The Brazilian finds show that the New World was discovered tens of thousands of years earlier than previously believed, certainly well before the time of the American Indians. But who were these pioneers? A much earlier wave of Mongoloids, or another race altogether? Clues to the identity of the first Americans are emerging in rock shelters in the northeast and southeast of Brazil. Archaeologists there have recently unearthed human remains. Prehistoric skulls were found buried in layers of soil 9,000 to 12,000 years old. They are the oldest skulls in the Americas. And this is the oldest of them all. The skull of a young woman nicknamed Luthia by scientists. Can she tell us who the first Americans were? Walter Neves is a physical anthropologist at Sao Paulo University in Brazil. He has been using a standard and reliable archaeological measure, the shape of the skull, to find out what race she belonged to.
91.
He fully expected Luthia to be a Mongoloid, an ancestor of the American Indians.
91.
But then he fed the measurements into the computer.
When we start running the computer and seeing the results, it was amazing because we realized that the statistics, the quantitative analysis we were doing was not showing these people to be Mongoloid. In fact, the analysis was showing these people as anything except Mongoloid.
So who was Luthia? And where did she come from? To find out, the skull was taken to a hospital in Rio de Janeiro to begin the process of reconstructing her face. The first stage was to make a three-dimensional CAT scan of Luthia's skull in order to build a replica. The cast was then given to Richard Neve of the University of Manchester in England, one of the world's leading forensic artists, to recreate her features.
That to me is a Negroid face that has all the features that you associate with a Negroid face. The proportions of the face, it doesn't say anything about it being Mongoloid.
Luthia belongs to a race found historically along the rim of the Indian Ocean, in East Africa, in the islands of South Asia, and in Australia and Melanesia. Was this then the face of a first American? Her reconstruction is confirmed by measurements Walter Nevis has taken of all his skulls.
The first reaction was not to believe in it. But as the results, repeated so many times, and the result is exactly the same thing. They are very similar to nowadays Aborigines and Africans, and no similarity at all with Mongoloids in Asia or with American Indians.
But how could Luthia be African and Australian? According to Walter Nevis, there's a very simple explanation. Luthia is a bit of both.
Yeah, so that video right there tells you and lets you know that the first group of people that were in the Americas were of this melanated skin. And from this video, it lets you know that it took place in Brazil. And if we came to the Americas by traveling across the Atlantic, it also lets you know that we probably ventured up from Brazil to other parts of the Americas, Central America and North America. One of the oldest civilizations that are in the Americas were the Olmec civilization, the Olmec people. And they, like I said, they developed the oldest civilization in the Americas during the Mesoamerican period, which took place in 1100 BC. And they were located down in southern Mexico. And they were established before the Mayans and before the Aztecs. Current day, you will find them as Afro-Mexicans. It's a population that's not really talked about or known in Mexico, and they're located down in the southern part of Mexico, close to the Gulf, between the Gulf of Mexico and the Pacific Ocean. And I have a few pictures of some Afro-Mexicans. Check them out. You might recognize the big stone-cut heads from the Olmecs, and you can tell by the features of the stone heads that the Olmecs were of African descent. The nose, the lips, all of those features let you know that the Olmecs were of African descent.
What I noticed about the article is that it says the earliest people in the Americas were people of the Negritic African race known as the Olmecs. I mean, you see it here clearly.
It's there.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's good stuff.
Something else that you will find is that even from the Olmecs in the North Americas, when the U.S. government was established, the melanated people in North America were labeled Native American. I know a lot of us have grandparents that have told us that they were part, or some family member was part of a Native American tribe, whether it be Cherokee or Seminole or Native American tribe like that. And the truth is that we were labeled as Native Americans before the government chose to change our classification to Negro or African American.
The next topic is on the Moors' influence in the world. Obviously, we've talked about the Moors in America and the melanated presence in the Americas. But now I think it's very important that we talk about who the Moors were in the world and what they did to influence the world, as it's very important and relevant to know why the melanated presence is so strong even in the world today, and why that presence is so strong in the world today. And I think you have another video.
I have another video.
All right, that tells us a little small brief history that may have been forgotten.
Yes.
Or stolen or erased.
Erased or changed.
All right.
The year is 1492. Christopher Columbus is about to embark on his world-shattering voyage to the Americas. And on his way to the coast, he stops off here at Granada. He's the honoured guest at a ceremony hosted by the King and Queen of Spain, Ferdinand and Isabella. They are celebrating a grand victory. Up until this day, Granada had been ruled by Muslims. But Isabella has managed to wrestle control from them.
Ferdinand and Isabella's victory marks a turning point for Spain and for Europe. The Middle Ages are over, and the West is about to embark on a new epoch of power and discovery.
We tend to think of this as the beginning of an era. In fact, it's the climax of a forgotten chapter in European history: the rise and fall of Islam in the West. It was Rudyard Kipling who wrote, "East is east and west is west, and never the twain shall meet." And it's a worldview that still has currency today. Islam and Christianity seem to have become ideological monoliths, citadels whose gates are firmly closed to one another. But they haven't always lived such separate lives. In the year 711 AD, Muslim forces invaded Spain and created a society so rich and so powerful it was the envy of the known world. This wasn't the rigid, ferocious Islam of our imaginations, but a progressive, sensuous, intellectually curious culture that for a number of spine-tingling years looked set to sweep through the whole of Europe. It is an incredible story, but one that has been systematically written out of history.
After the Catholic monarchs took over the city of Granada, they began to destroy all evidence that the Muslims had ever been in Spain. In the following century, the Spanish authorities persecuted and expelled 300,000 Muslims and burned as many as 1 million Arabic books. This was an astonishing act of ethnic cleansing. It put an end to a civilization which had flourished in Spain for 700 years. These people have become known as the Moors.
Propaganda, sparked by the Crusades, has given us an enduring image: the diabolical Moor, a dark-skinned, savage, alien enemy.
But this character is a complete invention and tells us nothing about who these people really were. Now, archaeologists and historians are starting to piece together the real story of the Moors in Spain. They're uncovering the remains of hidden cities, discovering the role of Muslims in the revival of the classics, and decoding the meaning of Islamic buildings.
Wow, powerful video,
Very
good
powerful.
stuff. I mean, it tells you a little bit about history and the things that we weren't taught in school about the Moors. I did some independent research of the Moors on my own, and just to find out a few facts about the Moors. So, throughout history, it's known that the Moors were pretty much expunged or eradicated from history. But I was able to dig up some facts about the Moors. One thing, in that video, she also alluded to the fact that there's been this fantasized version of the Moors that has been replaced now. The factual information has been replaced with the fantasized version. So here are some facts based on research that you can go and look up on your own about the Moors. It's a known fact that the Moors ruled Europe for about 700 years, from around 711 till around 1492. It's a known fact that the Moors brought math, science, agriculture, astronomy into Europe, and they helped bring Europe out of the Dark Ages into their period of Renaissance. It's a known fact that the Moors brought enormous learning to Spain throughout the centuries and through the rest of Europe as well. It's a known fact that the Moors brought schools and libraries and universities. In fact, some of the scholars that created the Oxfords and those universities that exist in Paris came to study at the Moorish institutes of learning before they established theirs. It's also a known fact that around the 10th and 11th centuries, public libraries in Europe just didn't exist. Or they had, I think they said they had only 2 or something in existence, whereas in Moorish Spain, they had over 70 libraries that were there. You can go look up any of this information on your own, and I encourage you to do so. The Moors were pretty much responsible for the Enlightenment that came through Europe and spread throughout the rest of Europe, from Spain to the rest of Europe. Dot your I's and cross your T's. You all.
Look, check it.
Yes. So now we want to get into the ancient civilizations that influenced the world. And when we talk about ancient civilizations, we're talking about melanated ancient civilizations.
Yes.
The first civilization that I can think of that influenced the world way back in the day were the Mesopotamian societies that existed between the Tigris and the Euphrates River. So maybe over 5,000, maybe back to 5,000 BC, you could date it back. The Sumerians, the Akkadians, all the way into the fall of Babylon, the Babylonians lived along that Mesopotamian river. But one of the greatest civilizations that we know of today is the ancient Egyptian civilization,
The greatest.
the Kemetic civilization. And what can you tell us about that civilization, sir, as it relates to the world?
When I traveled to Egypt, I could see a lot of the influence on especially the medical field that the Egyptians had on it. I have some pictures from when I traveled to Egypt, and what I like to do is let everyone know that when you travel to Egypt, you cannot just travel to Cairo, because when you travel to Cairo, then you're only going to see the people who are occupying Egypt now. You must go down into Luxor and Nubia to see the original people. And when I say the original people, I'm talking about the melanated people there. And I have a few pictures of the melanated people. from these pictures, there's no way that you can't tell me that that couldn't be an uncle or a father or someone that's related to you. The melanated skin is there. The facial features are there. These were the original people of Egypt.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And some of those people, I remember when I went to Egypt as well, you could see some of those people along by the Philae Temple and
Yeah.
some of these temples where, so if you haven't been to Egypt, I would say you definitely should go and
Must take a trip.
yes, if you
Must
like
take a trip.
history and you like science and you like old world, ancient civilizations, a trip to Egypt is a must.
Yeah. And when you go to Egypt, you can also see a lot of the medical advances that they had back in the ancient times. In the hieroglyphics and the carvings that are in some of the temples, you can see things that they use like scalpels and then cupping. Some of you might have heard of cupping, or it might sound familiar from the previous Olympics, where some of these Olympic athletes would use the cupping system to help bring blood flow to certain parts of their body to help the healing in the body and to make them heal faster. And you can see those not scars, but the marks from the cupping system in the different athletes. You'll see the round blotches to where the blood flow has been brought up to the top of the skin to help the blood flow and the healing in those sections. Even people like Michael Phelps
Wow.
use the cupping system.
Very interesting. And that can be traced back to
Ancient Egypt.
So those ancient civilizations are still influencing the world today.
Yes, and people don't know it. They're just a lot of things that the Egyptians have implemented into the world
Mhm.
that people use on an everyday basis, or and they just don't know.
Got it.
Yeah.
So again, our channel is education, exposure, and empowerment. We want to definitely expose you to things as we learn it. We would like to expose you to it so that you can then in turn expose and empower other people as well.
Yeah.
So here are some facts about Egypt that you should know and should be aware of. Egyptians were great at math. In fact, some of the earliest records of geometry came from Egypt. The alphabet system, well, the phonetic alphabet system is the one that we're familiar with today, where each letter represents a sound. Well, that also was very common in Egypt as well, as the Phoenicians were their neighbors. Papyrus paper. The discovery of papyrus and the reed pen for writing came from Egypt before the parchment in Europe or the paper in China. They recorded medical procedures and medicine using those papyrus logs. Well, Egyptians were the first to record procedures and medicine that came from Egypt. The surgical tools, written record of removing a cyst or tumors with tools in surgery, also came from Egypt. Toothpaste, you use it every day, you brush your teeth with it. Well, that also came from Egypt. It helped create this oral health, and the Egyptians were very much so about cleanliness and health. So even in some of the ancient tombs, you will see those toothbrushes buried with some of those people that were entombed.
I would say, I just want to add in, I know that when I saw a lot of the mummies, when I went to the British Museum
Yes.
and in Egypt, you can clearly see the teeth were very well taken care of. Along with the mummies, the teeth were very, very well taken care of.
Immaculate. The use of glass in crafts was also from Egypt. The Egyptians were very efficient, and they had efficient ways of using glass in their handicrafts. The next part of our program is sponsored by Melanation. Shout out to the Melanation once again. The next part of our program is called Questions for or things that should make you go, China, you're up first. We have some serious questions for you on the matters of cultural sensitivity, as well as the disrespectful and offensive choices you made in celebrating your new year. As I was sifting through some world news, I ran across an article on Marvel Comics' Black Panther movie that just made its debut in China not too long ago. The article goes on to talk about how many moviegoers thought it was too black. Others made negative comments of the all-black cast, and one saying it was a torture on the eyes. Then the article referred to China's limited exposure to race and how the month prior to the opening of the film, their annual gala by their state broadcaster CCTV, with about 800 million viewers watching, had a Chinese actress in blackface with a fake posterior, a black actor playing a monkey, and juxtaposed images of black people to things including monkeys and cheetahs. So naturally, I had to go to YouTube to make sure my eyes were not deceiving me in 2018. I also had to make sure that we were in the 21st century. I was shocked and appalled to see Africans on stage dancing, singing, drumming, and allowing themselves to be on the ass end of someone's distasteful humor. The event was held at a museum, and the exhibition was called "This is Africa." It was supposed to highlight the relationship between China and Africa. Instead, it came off as a despicable and terribly racist display for the world to witness such blatant arrogance as well as a lack of awareness. Let me give you some quick background history on blackface that you can later explore further on your own. Blackface can be traced back to the mid to late 19th century in America, when white actors would routinely paint their faces with black grease paint or burnt cork, as well as red paint around their mouths, grossly exaggerated to look like today's circus clowns. They called these performances minstrel shows, imitating black music, dance, and plantation dialect. They were not flattering representations at all. They took place against the backdrop of systematic racism, dehumanization, and mistreatment of dark-skinned, melanated people. They were portrayals that reinforced the inferiority of a whole group of people in every way. After World War I ended, black characters would assume these roles in blackface as white audiences didn't want to see them on stage without it. The caricatures that emerged from this period had names like Coon, Uncle Tom, Amos and Andy, Winch, Pickaninny, Mamie, Stepin Fetchit, and Bojangles. Which leads me right back to your Chinese New Year celebration. I'm not sure who sits upon your cultural sensitivity committee, or even if you have one. I'm not sure who greenlights content in China that is going to be broadcast for almost 1 billion people to watch annually. But really, who thought this was cool? Really, who thought that the equivalent of a modern-day minstrel show at the Spring Gala was the right show for an audience of 800 million? Just because you have removed the comments with censors doesn't mean you can remove the stain this puts on your country. For all the people who sat through this show laughing, amused, and entertained by this tomfoolery, shame on you. Thanks to the creation of the internet and the World Wide Web, there are no lame duck excuses you can use as a scapegoat to fall back on. Ignorance of inflammatory, racist propaganda should be outlawed by all nations, as it is a violation of catastrophic proportions. Since this is not your first rodeo, I've got to call you to the carpet, because if you walk like a duck, talk like a duck, and put on exhibitions like that as a part of your New Year's celebration in the form of entertainment, then you must be a duck. China, come on. What the?
Now that, totally uncalled for.
Unnecessary and unappreciated. So on a lighter note, we now have some positive inspiration for you. Again, sponsored by the
Melanation.
Melanation. The presence of melanated people in America can be heard through civil rights leaders like Malcolm, Martin, and Medgar, or movements like the Panthers, and later a move that was bombed out in Philly long before Black Lives Mattered. We can also be heard through the rhythms from the old spirituals to jazz, blues, rock, reggae to hip-hop, from the elders down to the children. We can be seen on the small to the big screen and commercials in between, with great style to the smile, from our hair to what we wear, shining like diamonds even without that old afro sheen. We can touch other continents with red-tail fighter planes flown by Tuskegee airmen, or find refuge outside of the stench of racism in America as did Paul Robeson, Richard Wright, Josephine Baker, and James Baldwin. You can smell the essence of food cooked from the soul, like collard greens to black-eyed peas, mac and cheese, okra, fish and grits, sweet potato pies, the sweet rolls, and so many other unique things. Most importantly, you can feel the imprint of our genius left behind through the movement of time. Just look at some of the civilizations and kingdoms from Benin, Ashanti, and Timbuktu with King Mansa Musa, the richest man that ever lived. You can see the Greeks came to study at the feet of melanated scholars that taught them science, math, philosophy, and all. But the key was to expunge and erase most of that from textbook history so you could never see what you possess and were meant to be. Know the ledge, y'all. All right, so our time is just about up now. What would you like for people to take away from today's program?
Okay. My number one thing that I want you all to take from this video is that for too long we've allowed people to define who we are. And when we allow people to define who we are, we get lost in not knowing ourselves. So I encourage everyone to go out and do some research to find out something about you. If you don't know where to start, YouTube is a good. Ivor Van Sertima, Asa Hilliard, Larry Rivers. Those are three names that I would encourage you all to go look up to find out what they're saying about this melanated skin.
And again, we want to emphasize our threefold message: education, knowledge is power. 2, exposure. Get yourself a hold of some of those materials, those things that Lemons was just sharing with you guys. You want to make sure that you are exposing yourself to some new material on a daily basis. And the final thing is empowerment. Once you get it, you go out and empower somebody else. Each one teach one.
Exactly.
And for that, we're ready for the final segment.
I know we both saw the new movie for Roxanne Shante on Netflix.
Roxanne.
Exactly. I want to be your man.
Yes.
Roxanne. Now, in that movie, we saw her using the brick phone.
The brick phone.
Yeah. So I know back in the day.
I don't think they know what the brick phone is.
Back in the day, I know you either had or used the brick phone,
yes,
or a bag phone.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, they might be familiar with the bag. So comment, let us know if you had the brick or the bag. Now you got to be old school for that. That's not for the youth movement, but
yeah,
the brick or the bag.
The brick or the bag.
Now which one are you familiar with?
We had the bag phone in our house.
My mom had the bag phone as well.
Yeah.
Can you tell people about the bag phone?
I remember we had the bag phone, but it was real expensive to use. It was like $0.25 a minute, either $0.25 or 50 cents a minute. And I used to have a girlfriend that lived in the town next to us, Quincy.
Oh, yeah.
And I used to try to get, be cool and call her
on the
bag phone.
Yeah.
Until my parents got the bill. And once they got the bill, they were like, nah.
I think it was about 50 cents a minute.
Yeah, I think 50 cents a minute.
I think that's about
yeah,
accurate.
they were like, no, you use the house phone. And even with the house phone, it was still 25 cents per call. So yeah. Not needless to say, that relationship didn't last too long.
Clearly. Alright, it couldn't have, man. I remember my mom having a bag phone, man. It was very interesting back in the day. Nobody could use that phone, first of all.
Yeah.
It was just like something that you carried around, and so I think it was just a status thing for people to have that bag phone back in the day. But I do remember it. I just don't ever remember using it. So You were privileged.
Listen,
I got
not
the
for
front
long.
like I was on it. Can we show the photo?
Not for long.
We need to show the
Oh
photo
yeah,
of the
yeah.
phone, right?
There it is.
So, the bag phone. Listen, if you haven't seen it though, Roxanne is the name of the movie on Netflix. It's really, really good.
Yeah.
We definitely got to encourage anything that we see with the melanated people. Again, it's on the presence of us.
Yes.
And it's on hip hop, so it's kind of on the same topic that we're on today. So, shout out, go watch that film.
Yeah. And we want you all to make sure that you please like, comment, and subscribe to the videos. We'll have more coming at you very soon.
Stay tuned, stay woke.
Peace out.
Peace out.